Okay, good day. So my name is John Conley. I'm going to be going over the cardiac conduction system. So what are we going to learn today? Learning objectives for today are we're going to compare and contrast the cardiac muscle tissue function with skeletal muscle and nervous tissue. We're going to describe the major components and functions of the cardiac conduction system. State the role of ion channels in generating the depolarization, plateau, and repolarization phases of cardiac action potentials. Describe the mechanism for spontaneous action potential generation in cardiac conductive cells. Describe the action potentials of contractile cells and compare their features to those of conductive cells. We're going to state two primary functions of calcium in regulating cardiac muscle contraction. Describe the phenomenon of overdrive suppression and its role in maintaining cardiac pacing. Identify the components of a normal EKG. And lastly, describe the cardiac rhythm abnormalities that appear as changes on an EKG. So these are some of the key terms that we're going to be going over throughout the length of this presentation. So what is the function of the heart? The heart is a vital organ whose primary function is to maintain blood circulation, ensure the delivery of oxygen and nutrients to body tissues, and removing waste products. It accomplishes this through a systemic cycle of contraction or systole and relaxation diastole. The heart operates as two interconnected pumps. The right pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs for oxygenation, and the left side pumps oxygen-rich blood to the rest of the body or systemically. Its activity is regulated by a specialized electrical system that coordinates heartbeats, and it adapts its rate and output to meet the body's varying demands. And the heart is comprised of two different types of cardiac myocytes: contractile, which surprisingly, they are responsible for contracting the heart. And these are denoted by their striated appearance, what they call intercalated discs, and they have a branch structure. And if you look at the top portion of this picture, you can see how they are branched together. And conductive, which are responsible for initiating and regulating the electrical signal. They are smaller and fewer than the contractile myocytes, but they are clustered in certain areas to generate and direct that electrical pathway. So let's go over the different types of muscle tissues that we've kind of already seen. So remember, there are three different types. There's skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. A cardiac is different in that it shares some similarities between both skeletal and smooth muscle. It is like skeletal muscle in the effect that they are both striated, but it is like smooth muscle because they are both involuntary and mononucleated. Cardiac muscle is different in the effect that it is both branched to allow for a greater conduction and more synchronous contraction, as well as being a autorhythmic, meaning that it produces its own electrical signal and beats on its own. So how do these types of cells work together? For the heart to function properly, it is an organ with many different individual parts that are required to work as a single unit. Both types of cells are required to effectively and efficiently pump blood and transport oxygen and nutrients to the rest of the body. This is done by the utilization of both the conductive or electrical and the contractile contraction cardiomyocytes. Specifically through the contractile cardiomyocytes, they are connected via those intercalated discs that I mentioned earlier. And these are located at the junctions where the individual cardiac muscle cells meet. And two denotable types of these cell-to-cell junctions desmosomes. Desmosomes, they are kind of like an anchor or a Velcro um, at the junctions or where the cells meet, and they help the individual cells resist mechanical stress because the heart is constantly beating and moving. They are integral to help the heart, basically the cells kind of stay together during more forceful contractions. And then also at those junctions, in order for the signal or the action potentials to um, jump from cell to cell more easily, they have what they call gap junctions. And these junctions allow for the direct passage of ions between those cells. This allows for the heart to, for the individual cells to contract in a more synchronized fashion and to rapidly transmit that electrical impulse across the cardiac muscle cells. So the cardiac conduction system, the electrical signals begins at the conductive cardiomyocyte of the sinoatrial node or the SA node. This is effectively known as the pacemaker of the heart and is in the upper right portion of the right atrium. The electrical impulse causes the contractile cardiomyocytes of the atria, the top two chambers on both the right and left side, to contract, causing blood to be ejected from the atria down into the ventricles. This Once that contraction happens, that electrical impulse is funneled into the atrioventricular node, seen right here in the middle, which is located in that lower portion of the right atrium. It's almost kind of directly, if you divide the heart into four quadrants, it's almost located right there in the center, between those four chambers. And the electrical signal passes inferiorly through the AV node to the bundle of His down here, and then branches off between the right and left bundle branches, and finally terminates at the Purkinje fibers. Due to this fast conductive rate that the impulse that helped to contract the contractile cardiomyocytes of the ventricles, allowing the blood to be transported to the lungs to perform the gas exchange of CO2 to O2, and then also helps blood to be ejected on the left side out into the body to the rest of the tissues systemically. So there are several key elements or minerals that are responsible for the function of the heart. So within the conductive cardiomyocytes, there's a series of sodium ion channels. And these ion channels do not need a voluntary stimulus to depolarize, but rather they do so at a predictable rate. And this is known as the pacemaker potential. And this is seen right here on the orange line. This is what initiates the beat of the heart, or the depolarization. So after the initial depolarization of the pacemaker potential, fast calcium ion channels open for calcium to enter the cell, further depolarizing it at a rapid rate. And that is seen right here on the red portion of the line, how it depolarizes very rapidly. And lastly, the potassium channels open once the calcium channels close. With the potassium channels open, this allows the cell membrane to reestablish its negative 60 millivolt that it needs to reopen the sodium channels and begin the process all over again. Again, this is kind of seen by this kind of turquoise bluish line until it reaches the most inferior portion of the line, and then it begins again with the sodium ion channels opening up. So now there is a distinct difference between the conductive side and the contractive side. In the contractile cycle, there's a long refractory period that the heart needs for oxygenated blood to more effectively be pumped throughout the body. The contractile myocytes also need a little push from the conductive myocytes to fire and begin again. And this is seen at the AV node whenever it does its cycle throughout the bundle of his right and left bundle branches, and then the Purkinje fibers. So as you can see here on the orange line, the action potential stimulates a fast voltage gated sodium channel, causing them to open rapidly. This raises the charge of the ions to roughly 30 millivolts when the channels close. So you can see that it goes just pretty much straight up. Next, this begins the plateau phase, and you can see it here on the purple line, how it just kind of stays steady. And this is a slow and gradual decline where calcium channels allow calcium to enter the cell slowly. And at the same time, potassium channels will open to allow potassium to exit the cell. And the exchange basically cancels each other out to represent, like I said, that purple line, and just kind of creates that plateau effect. So now the calcium channels close and the potassium continues to exit the cell. This helps to repolarize the cell and return it to its resting potential to await another cycle to begin again. This is seen here again with that kind of bluish turquoise-ish line. Without that delay, the heart would tend to contract on its own, creating some sort of arrhythmias, or the heart would not be able to effectively pump blood throughout the body without that plateau period. So now there are two roles that calcium plays within the cardiac cycle. And we kind of talked about with the last one that calcium is needed to create that plateau phase of the contractile myocytes. Secondly, calcium also combines with a regulatory protein, troponin, which allows for the interaction of a couple other proteins here, myosin and actin. And this helps create the power stroke of the contraction, or to get it pumping a little harder. So overdrive suppression. So what is overdrive suppression? Overdrive suppression is the phenomenon that allows the stronger intrinsic beat to be in the lead and create the overall pulse of the heart. The strongest electrical structure in the heart is the SA node. And we're kind of seeing it up here. And that beats between 60 to 100 beats per minute. After that, if we follow that electrical signal down into the AV node, and that beats at roughly 40 to 60 beats per minute. And then lastly, bundle of his, all the way through the Purkinje fibers, they beat at approximately 20 to 40 beats per minute. And this hierarchy acts as a backup system in case, for whatever reason, the heart becomes damaged. You have a secondary and tertiary tier to help the heart continue to function, albeit not optimally. So an EKG. An EKG is an instrument or tool used to measure the electrical activity of the heart. And there are two main types, a 12 lead and a 3 lead. So 12 lead consists of 10 electrodes on various parts of the body, one on the right side of the sternum at approximately the nipple line, and 5 more on the left side placed between the ribs, starting parallel with that first node and then counting across and in between the rib lines. So that gives you 6 right there, and you can see that through V1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then you have 4 more that are placed on the extremities, where you have right arm, left arm, right leg for whatever reason is denoted up here on the shoulder, but it would actually be placed down more on the hip or the right leg, and then the left leg down a little bit lower. And then the three lead. So three lead is more what you would see, not necessarily in a hospital setting, but more of an EMT or ambulance type setting. A three lead doesn't give as many views of the heart, but it only requires three electrodes. The white one goes on the right side on the shoulder. And then there is a black and red one that they go on the left shoulder and left hip. And an easy mnemonic or saying to kind of remember that: white on the right, and then smoke over fire if you're ever in that situation and need to know where to place them. So what does a normal EKG look like? Or what are the parts of a EKG? So a normal EKG, you will see a series of peaks and valleys that denote different phases of the heart during its systolic and diastolic cycles. They are denoted by the letters P, QRS, and T. And the P wave here represents the depolarization of the atria. QRS complex, URS, that denotes the depolarization of the ventricles. This depolarization of the ventricles is much more prominent than the atria due to the actual size and strength of the ventricles. And then lastly, the T wave, which represents a repolarization of the ventricles. Now, you don't see a repolarization of the atria because that is typically happening at the same time as the QRS complex. And that line typically gets overshadowed by the artifact of that QRS complex. So kind of going into normal and abnormal rhythms. The ones that you see before you, you have your normal sinus rhythm. This is beating at approximately that 60 to 100 beats per minute. And then you have sinus tachycardia and sinus bradycardia. The sinus is showing that it is a normal line. You can still see the P, QRS, T, P, QRS, T. But if you actually count the QRS complexes, you will see here that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is over a 10-second strip. So you just multiply that 6 times the 10, you got 60 beats per minute. I think I did the math on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 110 beats per minute. And then there are only 4 down here, so 40 beats per minute. There's a couple different reasons why you would see these different types of cardiac rhythms. Obviously, whenever you work out, you go for a run, you do any type of physical activity, the heart's going to raise to help oxygenate the body better. So after physical activity, you would see something with tachycardia. Stress can absolutely raise your heartbeat, any type of heart disease or misfunctioning of the heart. And then as far as bradycardia, again, fitness level will play a part. More fit individuals will have a lower, more efficient heart. But sleep apnea, any types of medications like beta blockers or anything like that, you can actually lower your heart rate by kind of bearing down like you're trying to go to the bathroom, and you can lower your heart rate there through your vagal tone. So there are a couple different reasons why you might see these different heart rates on an EKG. So fibrillation. Fibrillation is just a general term that describes a fast and irregular heartbeat. What you will see here on the top one, atrial fibrillation. It's has difficulty in determining the P and T wave during depolarization of the atria and repolarization of the ventricle. One of the big things with this is that because that atria is not firing correctly, blood can kind of stay stagnant in the atria. Once blood is stagnant, it tends to clot. So it tends to create that clotting cascade, and this can create some sort of embolism, which then can pass throughout the body, and that gives that just creates a better opportunity for pulmonary embolism or some type of stroke. So ventricle fibrillation, this is lethal and considered a shockable rhythm in CPR and advanced cardiac life support. Advanced cardiac life support, and I'll kind of go into a little bit on one of the next slides here. But if you ever watch any type of hospital or medical dramas and stuff, they say, hey, call a code. There's an algorithm that people are following. That's, charge, shock, things of that nature. So that you can kind of see that there is a very disorganized, irregular rhythm, that the ventricles are not producing enough pressure or pumping systematically to put blood throughout the body and oxygenate the body more effectively. So this is the algorithm that I talked about. And if you look here, not to really go into it too much, but you do start with CPR. And then once you actually analyze the rhythm, you're figuring out whether it's ventricular fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia. And those are your two shockable rhythms, as well as non-shockable rhythms, asystole and PEA, or pulseless electrical activity. So this is what the two shockable rhythms look like: ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia, or VFib and VTAC. So what you can look at here is, like I said, VFib is typically very unorganized and it's all over the place. There is no discernible rhythm on that whatsoever, ever. VTAC, I always kind of look at this. It either looks like a row of teeth, or sometimes it's a little softer and not so pointed at the apex. It looks like tombstones. This always just signifies to me that this person needs immediate attention and they need to be shocked right away. The next two rhythms here, cardiac asystole, this is essentially the flat line, no rhythm. That's when the machine is typically giving you the feedback of that monotone, just long beep. The heart is not functioning at all. And then the pulseless electrical activity, if you actually look at it, you will see a rhythm on the machine or on the readout. But when you actually go to feel for a pulse, you won't feel anything. So that's pulseless electrical activity. And at that point, the only thing that you can do is really CPR. So that is kind of it. Summary of what we learned. I know I kind of already went through the learning objectives. Let everyone give you a chance to kind of read through that. I'm not going to state it over again, but this is what we went over. And then the next two slides are my references, all the pictures that I pulled up, where I pulled the information, mostly through the text provided online, and then a couple from some other medical textbooks that I had, as well as pictures and where I pulled them up from. So that is it. Thank you for sticking around. If you made it through all of this, wish everyone good luck throughout the rest of the semester. Take care.